It starts with silence. Not the deep, profound silence of a vacuum or an empty cathedral, but a thin, unsettling quiet that slips into the world unnoticed. On the first day, you don't even register it. You wake up, you go about your morning, and maybe you feel a little more at peace. The usual hum of the city seems softer. The countryside feels calmer. You might think the weather is just right, muffling the world in a blanket of perfect stillness. But then a tiny detail snags at the edge of your perception. You're sitting on your porch, and you realize you haven't seen a single honeybee all morning. You're driving down the highway at dusk, and for the first time in your life, your windshield is perfectly, unnervingly clean. There are no splatters, no tiny bodies. The familiar chorus of crickets that has sung humanity to sleep for millennia is gone. It's a silence that isn't empty. It's a silence of absence. Slight pause, tone shifts from curious to ominous by the third day, the world knows. News reports flicker with confused biologists and entomologists, their faces etched with a dawning horror. It's not a localized die-off. It's not a new pesticide or a sudden plague. From the deepest caves of Vietnam to the highest peaks of the Andes, from the frantic ant colonies in the Amazon to the lone water strider on a suburban pond, every single member of the class Insecta has vanished. Not died, vanished. There are no bodies, no tiny corpses littering the ground. They are simply gone as if they were a line of code deleted from reality. And in their place, this terrible, growing silence. We thought we were the masters of this planet, that our dominion was absolute. We were wrong. The disappearance of the smallest, most numerous creatures on Earth was not an ecological event. It was a message. It was the first move in a game we never knew we were playing. A chilling announcement from the cosmos that we are not, and have never been, alone. And what followed that silence would redefine our understanding of life, the universe, and our own terrifying fragility within it. The first cascade began almost immediately, a domino effect rippling through the world's ecosystems with terrifying speed. We call it the pollination collapse. Humanity has always taken it for granted. The bee, the moth, the butterfly, they were the invisible, tireless workforce that powered our planet's greenery. 75% of the world's flowering plants and about 35% of the world's food crops depend on animal pollinators to reproduce. And now their workforce had been erased. Within the first month, the change was visible from space. Vast swaths of land, once vibrant with the colors of blooming flora, held their breath. The flowers opened, their petals unfurling in a beautiful, desperate plea to a world that could no longer answer. But no pollen was carried. No fertilization occurred. Almond groves in California became seas of sterile white blossoms. Coffee plantations in Colombia, the source of the world's mourning ritual, produced flowers that simply withered and fell, bearing no precious beans. The global supply of chocolate, apples, blueberries, avocados, all of it, was now finite. The last harvest was all there would ever be. Humanity scrambled, deploying fleets of tiny drones and armies of workers with cotton swabs, attempting to replicate the work of trillions of insects. It was a futile gesture, like trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon. The sheer scale was impossible. We were witnessing the beginning of a global famine, not from blight or drought, but from a profound and sudden loneliness in the heart of our planet's biology. As the plants began to fail, the second wave of the cascade struck, the Great Starvation. The food web, that intricate, beautiful tapestry of life, began to unravel thread by thread. Insects are the bedrock of countless ecosystems, the primary food source for an astonishing number of animals. The first to go were the specialists. Birds like swifts and swallows, whose entire existence was a ballet of aerial insect hunting, were found dead in their thousands, then millions, their bodies littering the ground beneath their nests. Bats, the silent predators of the night, vanished from the skies, their silent sonar calls finding no targets. Then, the collapse spread. Freshwater fish that fed on insect larvae began to die off, their bodies choking rivers and lakes in a slick, decaying blanket. Frogs, lizards, chameleons, shrews, an entire class of small predators simply starved into extinction. The silence in the fields and forests deepened, no longer just missing the buzz of insects. but now also the chirps, calls, and songs of the birds who ate them. It was a sterile world, a museum of what once was. The predators who fed on those asterisk animals, the snakes, the birds of prey, the foxes, soon followed. It was a chain reaction of hunger, tearing its way up the food web with ruthless efficiency. While the world above was starving, the world below was rotting. Insects aren't just food. They are the planet's sanitation department, its recyclers and decomposers. Without flies, beetles, and ants, the natural cycle of decay ground to a halt. Dead animals, from the smallest mouse to the largest deer, no longer vanished in a flurry of insect activity. They just lay there, bloating and putrefying, becoming vast breeding grounds for bacteria and pathogens. Animal waste, no longer broken down and repurposed by dung beetles, piled up, contaminating water sources and spreading disease. Forests' floors became choked with layers of dead leaves and wood, a thick, unbreathing mat that smothered new growth and prevented nutrients from returning to the soil. The soil itself began to die. Without the constant burrowing and aeration from ants, termites, and larvae, it became compacted and lifeless. The very foundation of our terrestrial world was hardening, becoming infertile. The planet was developing a fever, a sepsis of its own making. Humanity, facing mass starvation and ecological collapse, now also faced the terrifying prospect of new, unknown pandemics rising from the filth of a world that could no longer clean itself. We were living on a corpse. Amidst the chaos and the collapse, the world's greatest minds were focused on a single, terrifying question. How? How could trillions upon trillions of organisms, representing millions of species and an unimaginable biomass, vanish from a closed system in an instant? It violated the fundamental laws of physics. The law of conservation of mass states that mass cannot be created or destroyed. They should have left something behind, bodies, energy, a radiation signature. But there was nothing. It was as if a cosmic editor had simply deleted the very concept of insect from the universe's source code. For 2 years, scientists scanned, probed, and modeled, but found no answers. Until a team at the Gran Sasso National Laboratory in Italy, using deep Earth quantum entanglement detectors, found it. It was a ghost in the machine. A faint, residual signal embedded in the quantum foam itself. A whisper-thin wave pattern that had permeated the entire planet for precisely 4.7 seconds on the day of the vanishing. When they mapped its resonance, they felt a cold dread that went far beyond the ecological crisis. The signal wasn't random. It was a complex, targeted frequency, tuned with surgical precision to the unique quantum signature of one specific molecule, chitin, the very substance that makes up the exoskeletons of all insects. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. This was technology. It was an act of unfathomable power and precision. Someone or something had reached across the void of space and selectively erased every insect on Earth. This discovery shattered our perception of the universe. The Fermi paradox, the question of why, in such a vast universe, we have never seen signs of intelligent life, was answered in the most horrifying way imaginable. The great silence in the cosmos wasn't because it was empty. It was because the apex predators, the true masters of the galaxy, preferred it that way. We began to call them the gardeners. We imagined them as a civilization billions of years old, viewing entire biospheres not as collections of life, but as gardens to be tended, pruned, and occasionally weeded. And insects, from their alien perspective, were weeds. They were chaotic, resilient, and far too adaptable. They were a messy variable in the clean equation of planetary development, so the gardeners had simply removed them. Perhaps this was standard procedure. Perhaps they moved from world to world, preparing them for some unknown purpose. Were they preparing Earth for themselves? Were they clearing the way for a new, preferred form of life they intended to seed here? Or was it something even more chilling? Was this a test? Had they removed a cornerstone of our ecosystem just to watch what we would do? To see if we were intelligent enough, resilient enough, to survive the collapse we were now enduring? Were we a failing experiment, soon to be wiped clean like chalk from a blackboard? Every satellite dish, every radio telescope, once aimed at the stars in a hopeful search for connection, now listened in terrified silence, praying we would hear nothing, because any signal we received would not be a greeting, but a final judgment. We now live in the quiet world. The famine is managed through vast, sterile hydroponic farms growing the few wind-pollinated grains we have left. The sky is empty of swallows, the nights are empty of moths, the forests are empty of song. Our world is a shadow of its former self, a global ecosystem on life support, and humanity is the exhausted doctor, knowing the patient will never truly recover. The initial horror has subsided into a permanent, low-grade dread. We have survived, for now, but we understand the truth. The disappearance of the insects was not the main event, it was the prologue. It was the sound of a gardener sharpening their shears before turning to the rest of the garden. We are no longer masters of our own home. We are tenants on a property owned by an unspeakably powerful landlord, living on borrowed time and awaiting an eviction notice that could come at any second, without warning and without a sound. We look up at the stars now, not with wonder, but with the cold, primal fear of a creature that has just realized it is no longer the apex predator. The silence they left behind was only the beginning. The true terror lies in wondering what they are preparing to take next.